You're listening to CIA, Coffee, Intel, and Anxiety, a podcast from retired CIA officers Jeff and Pete. Drawing from decades in the intelligence world, they offer real stories, sharp analysis, and honest reflections on the pressure, decisions, and daily chaos that come with a life of secrets. Add coffee, a dry sense of humor, and a friendship forged under fire, and you've got a podcast like no other.
Brother Pete, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing fine, Jeff. How about you?
Living the dream, married to a nightmare. Oh, wait, she can't do
We can edit that out if you want me to. Otherwise, we'll let it roll. No, all's good. I mean, I'm pretty excited about the episode we have today because we previously spoke about a few episodes back. We spoke about travel, international travel security, etc. And today we have a continuation, but more specifically, it's going to be focusing on how we protect our data, our information when we're traveling, into the country and the considerations we need while we're there and also when we're leaving. And a lot of this we're sure going to share really applies as well to individuals, whether they're going as tourists or whether they're going as business executives that travel overseas, depending on where they're going, depending on their profile, they could directly be targeted. So I think we have a lot of information that could be of interest to people today.
I think you're right, and I think that we have to look at it from the perspective of the internal service. They don't really care why you're coming into the country. They're not necessarily going to believe why you're coming into the country because they've been dealing in the world of counterintelligence and counterintelligence. So they're going to assume it's a lie if you are a person of interest. Whether you're a person of interest because of the industry that you're in, if you're in a high-tech sector or a government sector or who knows what, their default is going to be that you're there to do bad things. And so they're going to be paying attention to you.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important to realize that. I mean, how do you come across their radar initially? It's usually if you're going to be applying for the visa in advance, and people have done this. They fill out this really detailed form, their name, their contact information, who their employer is, what's the purpose of their travel, where they're going to be, and it's pretty much there where, depending on the list of priorities, they're going to either process that visa right away, or they're going to send over that application to the service for them to take a look at it and make a determination if they're going to be interested in you and want to actually perhaps monitor your activities, right? And if they're monitoring you, I mean, your next point probably is going to be you're arriving there, and upon arrival, and that individual is going to have your name up there already with some questions to ask, determine whether or not they're going to take you into secondary.
Certainly in the digital age, it's just a matter of hitting a button. And then I'm sure that they have programs that can filter applications that come in online, depending on how you do it. And then, once it goes there, it's immediate. There's no thought process involved. Then when your information gets to the security service, it says, okay, Jeff's arriving on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning from Beirut. And so your name's going to be there. They're going to flag you, or they may not flag you. It depends on what you're doing. Depends on how often you've traveled there before. I mean, you and I have both had the benefit of traveling to the same place a lot of times. And so they get to know you, or they recognize your name and they see who you're meeting. Because in our world, we had to be consistent. Consistency was something that kept us out of trouble. So we went, we did our job, and we kept our profile low. And so that's what they're looking for. But in this digital age, they're going to spot who's ever coming. If they're looking for technology companies, if they're looking for people serving in the military, again, it's all in the digital world. There is no information that they cannot have access to.
I think so. What countries are we talking about? I guess from a standpoint of where they might be more a bit aggressive, let's say, in monitoring Americans.
Syria comes to mind,
Yeah.
um, and I've been there many times, and I never had an issue, but I was also always prepared. And the one time I almost had an issue, I fell back on my stupid voice. I got through immigration and no problem, stamped passport. And then I picked up my suitcase and I do speak Arabic. And the gentleman at the customs desk that I had to walk past said to me in Arabic, "What do you have in it?" And I said to him in perfect Texan English, "Excuse me, what'd you say? I didn't understand." Of course, what was his reaction?
Yeah, let him go. I don't have time for
Get
this.
out of here, but not right. I don't have time for this. And I
Hmm.
just kept on going. So you got to pay attention. You got to play the game. And even if you're a regular, legitimate businessman, you still have to play the game and you have to be aware of the game. And I think that's part of what our discussion today is going to be.
It is. I mean, and there's some countries where you can be almost guaranteed that you're going to be coming as an American coming in, that you're going to be monitored or they're going to look to hack into your system. I mean, a country such as for sure Russia, right? For sure China. I mean, in China, I didn't go for work reasons. It was purely a tourist visit by my wife and I several years ago. And we're going to talk about kind of like how do we prepare for something that might be very high, danger of being targeted. And one of those that we get into is talking about leaving pretty much everything behind and only taking in what you absolutely need, maybe taking in something that's totally clean. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so we did that. I told my wife, we are not going to be on social media. We are not going to be accessing any of these other accounts. We're going to be only getting online if we need to for emergency reasons. And we even set up fake accounts, so that we could send a message to our children or our children could send a message to us without getting on our email accounts. So we did that, right? We had no problem whatsoever. However, there were a number of people in the tour group, quite a few actually, that every night, they got to the hotel and they were uploading pictures on Facebook and these other things. A good many of them actually were reporting a few days into it that their computer, there were, different things happening, and they said, "Man, we got our systems hacked." And once again, they were only tourists, but they got a whole team of people that are focused on, especially Americans that are coming into China. So this
You
is a
don't
point
even,
that it's not, and if even if some of the countries that might not, where we might not be high on the target to monitor, like maybe some of these countries in the Caribbean, some of the countries in Latin America, Africa, the fact that there are criminal groups as well that will target us, whether it's cash or stealing our information. I'll give you one quick example here, Jeff. My wife is from the country of El Salvador. There
Mhm.
was a period of time in El Salvador where criminal groups were working with customs individuals, and basically customs individuals would see, well, okay, you're coming through with how many suitcases, da 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 da, and you would fill out the form, right? Upon arrival, where your address is, where you're going. And so they would pass that information to criminals on the outside who would pick you up at the airport and follow you to your residence. And then, man, they would get you. I mean, that was basically to rob you. But so, I mean, so this is a threat. It has nothing to do with the whole service, but just criminal element. And that takes place in a number of countries.
Right. Well, the criminal element is important. And it's also important to remember that there are no friendly countries out there. I mean, let's be honest. Each country operates its own best interest. I'm going to pick on Israel. I support Israel. Okay. You know that. I'm a
Hmm.
big fan of Israel. However, when I traveled into Israel, I said several times, man, they got out the latex gloves and they gave me the going over. Even though I was on a liaison visit
Yeah.
still gave me the going over. And that's the way they do it. They got an American coming in. Yeah, I think it was a black passport, whatever it was, doesn't matter. Um, they're going to give you the going over because they are operating in their own interest. And Israel is our closest ally in the Middle East. And yet
Right.
they're going to target because they're targeting in the best interest of Israel.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
Germans are going to target because they're operating in the best interest of Germany, even though they're our ally since, however long now. Same
Hmm.
with France, same with, some other African countries. Um, so
Right.
yeah, there's no such thing as a friendly country out there. Yep, there's the Five Eyes. They may or may not give us a pass. Depends on what they're looking for. But then again, to be honest, some of the tougher times I've had was when I flew back into the United States. And they don't cut anybody any. What were you doing in the Middle East?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes that's where we run into our biggest problems as intelligence officers. So let's take a look at, I guess, some of the best practices or things that we should do along what depending on what phase you are. And the very first phase is going to be the pre-travel preparation. And you can't, I mean, so many of us we have very, as even as intel officers or business people, we have hectic schedules and we do a lot of traveling. And it might be you're just barely getting your suitcase packed before that Uber arrives to take you to the airport. You cannot operate that way. When it comes to this stuff, we really need to sit down, take a breath, and think about what am I doing? Where am I going? What's my profile going in? And also, what am I taking into that country? What kind of data, any sensitive data regarding the company, IP information and personal data on ourselves. That can also be, information that's going to be sought after. So we need to think that through and try to minimize what our digital footprint is going to be. What does that mean? We travel with minimal devices and make sure that they are clean. Don't take anything you don't need. And we recommend do not take the laptop or your iPhone that you're using on a regular, basis, especially for going to places that have high threats, leave those behind. Buy a burner phone, buy a burner laptop. That means a fresh one that's never been used before. Ensure that you don't upload all these different applications and things before you go. You want it completely clean. If you need to take information with you, make sure that it is encrypted and that the original of the information is back home. And if you need to take that information, it's a copy of that information, but ensure that it's encrypted. You probably want to really, do an encryption of the full disk using something like File Vault or BitLocker. There's a few other ones out there. Use strong password phrases and not biometric. We'll talk about why we don't want to use biometric to lock and unlock our devices when we're traveling overseas. So we want to disable any, the fingerprint for metrics. We want to disable, the facial recognition, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Use only temporary travel-only accounts. Try to enable two-factor authentication. And if we have a password manager, I mean, if we need it, we make sure that you have a password manager that's going to be only on your computer and not something that you have to get online to be able to use. What about Jeffrey? What about the day of travel? What are some of the things we need to be considered when we're in transit?
Well, you need to make sure that you give yourself enough time. That would be the first thing. So make sure that you plan your schedule to give yourself enough time to get through all the stops. The U.S., some of the airports here are they're mayhem, and they're not getting any better. But lots of countries overseas, the airports are just as bad. So if you're trying to fly out of someplace, you're trying to fly out of New Delhi, you're trying to fly out of Bangkok, they're going to be courteous. Chances are, you might be flying business class. Nonetheless, they're still going to look very closely at you. So you have to give yourself enough time so that you're not rushed all of a sudden to get on the plane or to get through customs or whatever it may be, or excuse me, immigration, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. I think, there's also considerations. I mean, whether this could be while you're still in transit in the United States or somewhere abroad where you don't want to, I mean, you probably heard this, I'm sure. You don't want to plug your computer directly in to the outlets or charge your telephone with these outlets at the airport. I mean, probably low risk of this to happen, but it does happen. And there are these devices that you can use. I mean, have a backup battery that you can use to charge your devices on and not depend upon plugging it into these outlets, because some of these outlets could be compromised and be used to drain the computer or your phone of sensitive information.
Again, it goes back to why are you carrying it to start with? Why are you carrying your computer? Why are you carrying your iPhone? Can you get a flip phone? Is that good enough? Can you have your partner meet you in country where they'll provide you with whatever technology you need? They'll give you a cell phone, they'll give you a laptop that you can use locally, and you just leave it when you leave.
And there have been cases, think about you want to maintain positive control over these things all of the time. However, there are a couple of times when you might lose that positive control. One thing is going through TSA. Think about it. You at some point got to put that laptop in your phone through the X-ray, and you got to hold. I mean, and then you got to go separately through a check before you get to be able to pick up these things. And you just got to hope that those are there, right? Most of the times they are, but there have been cases when they have been picked up. Maybe inadvertently, someone confused, or they intentionally someone stole it and ran off with it, and now it's not in your positive control. The other time when you might lose that positive control when you're coming into the country, that foreign country, and now you're going through customs. You're going through immigration controls and you're going through customs controls, and they have in these countries they can take that device and attempt they might be just a general thing, say, hey, can you please open this? We want to see what's inside it. And this is why we talk about don't use biometrics. You disable biometrics for putting first of all, sorry, you want to make sure that device is off, power down. Don't have it on while you're in transit or going through customs. Have it powered down. And if they want to, which requires, and now if they want to get into it, you got to first power it up, you know. And if you have the biometrics enabled, it could still be quite easy for them to inadvertently, get a face, put the device in front of you to get the face verification or your thumbprint. But if you disable that, you're going to have to log in to these and use a password. And you could buy some time. You could make sure that you don't put the correct password in. Make it impossible for them to be able to unlock. And most of the time, that's going to get you through without any requirement. I mean, depending on how suspicious they are of you, they could take you into the secondary. They could try to put a little bit of pressure on you. But this is pretty much to avoid that possibility that they can easily get into your devices. You want to maintain as much positive control and not allow them to get into your devices.
Absolutely.
You got to be thinking about powering down the devices, maintaining positive control, and not and with the mindset that they might want to. I mean, if they take that device, I mean, I think of Israel and some of these other countries. If they take that device away from you, they can easily, in a few minutes, download all that information. So this is another reason, that information that's on there should be encrypted. It should only be that information that you truly need. You got to think about the worst case scenario. And when you're coming back, we'll talk about this too. When you come back, consider that some different aspects of your information and or your devices are now compromised. And what are you going to do about it, right?
So the other thing that you're going to do when you're in country, assuming you get through there, is you're going to be taking a lot of notes.
Oh, yeah, especially if you're an Intel officer, right?
Exactly. And so you got all those notes, you take it, you put it on your computer, you lock the computer, encrypt everything like you're supposed to. What do you do with those pieces of paper you took your notes on? How do you get rid of them?
I love it. We got
Throw them
some,
in the
we got
trash?
some. You got an idea, don't you? This is what we do. This is what we were trained.
Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
It just disappeared on me, Jeffrey.
There it is.
Okay.
All right. This is called flute and burn, where you fold the paper like this, and the only reason you do that is so that you can then balance it on a plate or a counter, or I used to do it in the bathtubs. The first time I did it in the bathtub, I forget what country it was. I think it was Syria, actually. I did it in the country. I scorched the bathtub. It was just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Yeah, I know. I learned not to do it in the bathtub after that. I wanted to make sure I had something that was ceramic and not plastic. So let's see how this is going to work. This is called flute and burn. This will allow you to destroy documents in
With
a
minimal smoke, right?
low smoke environment. See, I'm standing right over it. Come on. And so you can see how that's burning down. I'm standing right over it. I mean, that's literally coming into my face. It feels warm, but you're not getting a lot of smoke off it. You can't see a lot of smoke coming off it. And then when you're done, you're not going to have anything but a pile of ash. And then you take that pile of ash and you flush it down the toilet. And so no matter what is on this piece of paper, no matter what your notes were when you were taking notes, they're gone. They cannot be reconstructed. And that was one of the reasons why you and I did it this way, so that any notes we might have taken could never be reconstructed. And
I had a bit of a challenge one time because I traveled into a country. Actually, I was using my spouse and my children as sort of my cover reason for why I travel in.
Oh yeah,
I had my meeting with the source, gave me at that particular meeting a whole bunch of documentation. I'm talking about several, I mean, probably easily 200 or 300 sheets maybe more. And I'm thinking, how am I going to do this, in my bathroom and stuff? They're going to be smelling it eventually and knocking on my door. So I took all the information out of those documents that I needed, and I put those into my reports and encrypted it to be able to send back to our employer, right? But then I had to see how am I going to get rid of this. So I actually took them with me. We drove outside the city into a kind of a really rural area, and I found a quarry. It had heaps of sand, gravel, and big hole, and there was like nobody there at all. So I just basically drove behind one of these big heaps of gravel, and I got a, I guess I got away. I just told my wife, hey, I need to take care of this. I'll be back in 15 minutes or whatever. And I made sure that I was out of sight of my children because they would have like, what is dad doing, right? And so then I took these documents and I had a bit of a bonfire. I was not so worried about the smoke. I just wanted to take care of this really quickly. Burned everything up, scattered the ashes, and then I was out of there. But you don't want to take the risk of taking this information, even if you think, well, they never checked me before. I should be
Right.
okay. I'm going to take this in my suitcase, and when I get back home, I'm going to put it through the shredder. No, no, no. That's when something's going to happen, and it can be pretty ugly if they
I used
catch
to
you.
line them up in the bathtub.
Yep.
I mean, five, six, seven, 8 pieces of paper, light them up, next row, next row, next row. One of
Yeah.
the big paper dumps like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But there is also, I'm thinking about when some of these other aspects of when we travel into a country, some of the things we need to be concerned about in protecting our data. We can't leave anything in the hotel room because even the safe is not safe. If you call in one of these individuals because you locked yourself out, they got a master key and they can get into it you know, in a heartbeat. So we gotta be sure you always have positive control of everything. And I say positive control, you really should ideally have it on your person because if you have all the stuff in a laptop bag or whatever, that too can be swiped relatively easily. So the more positive control, the more secure you will be regarding these items, right? But then
Absolutely.
we have the we're traveling out, right? And usually if as long as we don't have anything on us, oh, I know I don't think I wanted to bring up. We still have cover stories for everything that we've done, right? We had to have a cover story about why we're traveling into that country, something that maybe they could even verify. They could try to verify or make it something impossible for them to verify, but still, sounding legitimate. Okay. And one of the things is when I traveled into this particular country I just mentioned, it was to meet one source, and I had to take money. I had to take money in. I fortunately it was just beneath the threshold of the $10,000, but there was always that possibility of why do you have $9,000 in cash? What am I going to say? You know, but there was in this particular country, I won't mention where it is, but there is a lot of classic cars or old pickups, especially in the rural parts of the country that were people would buy because they're still from the 40s and the 50s. And so that was typically my story. Every time I travel here, I take a look at what's available, and if I find the right vehicle, I'm going to put this cash down immediately. So that you want to have some kind of cover story for why you're carrying this cash or anything you're carrying on you that might be a little bit outside the norm.
You got to have a cover story for whatever you're doing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And whether it's going to lunch, carrying cash, meeting with a friend, whatever it may be, you have to be able to explain to the local authorities, why are you doing this?
Hmm.
And it has
Hmm.
to make sense to them. Maybe
Hmm.
buying old pickup trucks, that makes perfect sense to them. Come down
Hmm.
to Florida, buy old pickup trucks, that's your excuse, and you're going to spend a little bit of time in Polk County Jail. Uh,
Explaining. Yeah.
but there are other places where, yeah, that'll work. And again, you're selling, you're an American, you have money, so you're not the smartest guy. You want to buy this truck. So yeah, that's a story they'll sell with them. So yeah, that's a great cover story.
Yeah. Okay, so then now we're traveling back to the motherland, right? Back to the United States of America. And as you mentioned, I think we can maybe talk a little bit more about this, but this is where we, as intelligence officers, interesting, have probably more of a challenge than a lot of other places. You're thinking you shouldn't have any problems, but we sort of have this profile, and people look at where we're traveling to and the frequency of travel, and it's like, why did you go there? What are you bringing back here? And so we get questioned a lot more, and because maybe we fit the profile of someone as a drug trafficker, potentially, right? A profile, and these guys, and Customs and Immigration here in the United States are really, really, really well trained and looking at the body language and looking at, they're putting out one question, and based on our response to that one question, that's probably going to determine whether they're going to let us, go ahead, or they're going to subject us to a lot more questions.
I forget what airport I was flying into in the US, but I got up to the immigration officer and handed him my passport, and I'm coming back on business, whatever, whatever. That guy spent about 3 minutes going through my passport. He looked at every page. He looked at every visa. He was waiting for me to say something, I think, because he didn't ask me any questions because they were all legitimate visas. I mean, I'm a businessman and they're visas, and I travel around the Middle East. I live in Abu Dhabi, whatever, whatever. But man, he looked at each page. You could tell he was skeptical. So the trick was to just stand there and kind of let him do his job. And that's if you're dealing with customs and immigration folks, just let them do their job. It's kind of like in here, if
Yeah,
you're dealing with a cop, let the cop do his job and don't
that's
argue,
really
don't give him a hard time. Just shut up and wait.
That's really important. It's not just for that one time you're potentially experiencing that. If they have suspicions of you, if they take you into secondary, ask you a lot of questions, they're gonna document that, and it's much more likely that you're gonna get pulled in again to secondary, during subsequent trips. Very, very, very possible. So maintain, don't be arrogant. Don't get loud. I mean, asking if there's a problem is not, not a problem in itself, but you just don't want to be confrontational at all. Just let them, as Jeff said, let them do their job. It's really
Just stand
important.
there and wait
Mhm,
patiently, and they'll get through it all. Trust me, if they have questions, they're going to ask.
mhm.
You don't need to say, "Do you have questions, officer?" They're going to ask. So
Yeah,
just be quiet, maintain your profile, even though you're tired because it's an international flight, you haven't slept in a couple of days, just stand there and be quiet, and they
yeah.
will do it.
I think I just want to add just a couple of comments regarding now, we're back home. We got through a custom immigration. We're back at our house. We're back at the office. And, what we should still, from a good sense of cybersecurity hygiene, okay, we have to assume that very likely that we've been compromised. Maybe very little, maybe a lot, but so we should be running a malware scan on that computer that we've taken, and a laptop, and maybe our phone. We want to wipe and reformat entirely these travel devices. Once again, we shouldn't really use these same travel devices for use in the States, but we can wipe them clean for our next trip, per se, but do not use them for your normal business activity or personal activities in the States. Put them, wipe them clean, put them on a shelf until next time. Change any passwords that maybe we had to use during the trip, because if you inadvertently were using or getting access to some of your accounts because you just needed to, you want to make sure that everything has been password, cleansed. And think about, were there any incidents that happened to you during this trip? Even if they may appear to be minor, maybe all of a sudden you were approached by somebody on the street. Their English was impeccable, right? Which is kind of a suspicious for us because lots of times the services or even some of these really sophisticated criminal groups will sorry, send somebody to begin a conversation with you, and they might have perfect English. You might say, I got no time for this, whatever, but still, you want to think about anything that happened during your trip that could be a little bit suspicious. Log that in, for your own benefit and maybe for the security team, of your company, so that anybody else from your company that travels to this region, they might see a trend. They might see, some of these things. Say, yeah, several of our executives have been targeted while they've been traveling to this country. Why is it? Is it because of our companies of interest? So you want to definitely document that information.
Absolutely correct, Pete.
hmm So we talked about a lot today, but what we got coming up?
We have a very special program where we're going to talk about people who claim to be something that they may not be and how you can see through that. So that's what we're going to look at next, I believe.
Hmm.
And I think we're also going to look at when you apply to work for a government agency, what's involved in that process and what are they looking for?
Yeah, I think actually we're gonna, yeah, reverse that order. We're gonna take a look first at what are the skills and qualifications that, especially the CIA, since we had that direct experience, right? What they are looking for and to recruit officers like us, and what are some of the skill sets that they're looking for? These innate skill sets as well as what they believe that they can, you know, train us into developing. And I think there's a lot of listeners that I say like, I get this question all the time. How did you get into the CIA? Or how can I apply? And so there's a lot of different stories because there's a lot of different techniques that are used. And so we'll talk about that. And then, that other episode, which we'll talk about people who claim to have been recruited into the CIA or other, intelligence agencies from the US or military. And we'll maybe who never worked for the agency at all, but have claimed that they have, or maybe they've had a role in the CIA and are sort of embellishing, exactly the extent of what they did. So we're going to talk about that. We have some specific cases that we'll bring to light, and we will also provide you different ways of vetting whether or not these individuals are, being truthful, being, different ways that you can try to confirm whether or not they actually have had this experience. So look forward to discussing these topics in upcoming episodes.
All
Final
right.
words.
Stay safe.